Welcome. Hi, how are you? Welcome to Dad's. I want to hear your story again. Next episode in this series, or this particular episode, we're continuing on memories with your siblings. And today I'm going to start off with memories of Anne Marie, my younger sister. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of memories, tell a couple stories, and you'll get the idea. So the first story or the memory that when I think of my sister Anne Marie, one of the first things that popped up was the moped. So let me set the stage here. A moped, kind of a motorized bicycle, right? It's smaller than a scooter, more powerful than a regular bike. The one that Anne Marie bought, it was like a 1980s some edition of moped. They were all the craze. They were good on gasoline, and it had pedals and it only went like maybe 30 miles an hour, not much. So I don't remember how old I was. She must have been 15, maybe 16, and I don't think I was driving yet. And so she bought this moped, and of course I wanted to ride it. It was her pride and joy. She bought it, and I think it was red. It was a red moped. And when before she could ride it around the neighborhood or on streets, my dad said, "Okay, I'll let you ride it, but you have to ride it like just literally around the house. So you could go down the sidewalk, down um, the gravel driveway that was between our house and the neighbor's house. So you could just kind of ride it like there." So I was begging Anne Marie, let me ride this moped. And of course, she let me. And what do? I lost my balance going down the gravel driveway and I brushed up against the wall. There was a stone wall between the properties, and I scratched the side of the gas tank. And I felt so bad. Anne Marie was so upset that I did this to her. Like it wasn't brand new, but it was new to her. This moped, and I mean, I just felt horrible. So after the initial, she's mad at me, and we're both crying, and I'm so upset. I we put the moped in the shed and I got out my model paint. I used to do model rockets and stuff. I think I talked about that. And I got out my paints and with a flashlight, painted and fixed the scratch marks on the side of the gas tank. So unless you were like looking right at it, you couldn't tell that I scratched it because I touched up all the paint. And she was very appreciative that I did that. But that was just one of the stories. Think about growing up. Anne Marie and I were very close, and I felt bad that I scratched her moped. So moving on, talk about Skeeter. So Skeeter was Anne Marie's pet hamster. I don't remember how old she was when we were kids when she got it. So she had the whole setup. Man, she had the hamster habitat with the tubes and the little things that he could crawl through, and then he had a wheel in there. And we had a a plastic ball that you could put Skeeter in, and he would run around the house, and you chase him and play with him. And I remember one time Tammy said something like, "Oh, look at that little whippersnapper," and she kicked the ball when Skeeter was in there, and of course he went boom, 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 rolling down the living room. We thought it was oh, look at this big truck trying to go down the street. Oh, is he gonna fit? Boy, he got close to the Honda. I should pull the Honda off the street. Anyway, um, so Anne Marie had this pet hamster. We all love Skeeter. Well, one time, so Skeeter's eye started to look kind of, I don't know, it didn't look good. And then it kind of came crusted over like he was losing his eye. And we actually took him to the vet. I remember Anne Marie had a little box and she had a nice towel in there. She put Skeeter in there. And we went to the vet, and the vet's like, it's a hamster. It was probably what, 50 cents? But, we love the hamster. So he gave Skeeter some eye drops. and we put eye drops in that, trying to get him better. And then I remember, oh gosh, I remember when Anne Marie woke up that morning and she goes, Skeeter's dead. Oh, talk about learning a life lesson about loss. And I was, Anne Marie, obviously we're very close, Anne Marie and I, and Anne Marie loved that hamster. And just that initial, as a child, learning what it is to lose something that you love, and it was an animal, but still, it was tough. And Anne Marie and I buried him. We had a cigar box. Maybe it was the same cigar box from our adventures. Who knows? But we had a little cigar box, and we, put, like, I don't know if it was a dishcloth or a paper towel, some type of little towel in there, and made him a little bed, and we buried him in a corner of the garden where he would never be disturbed. Fast forward many, many, many years, when we were teenagers, we dug up Skeeter and dug up the box. And it's funny because the worms had managed to burrow holes into the box. And I don't know, as Skeeter's body decomposed, the worms must have fed on it or something. Because when we opened up what was left of this box, there was this like little pancake of fur left in there, and that was the leftovers from Skeeter. So that was a story of Skeeter and Anne Marie. Building forts in the living room. So I don't know if I had mentioned, growing up, I was terrible in school. I was always losing TV privileges. So every time a report card came home or a bad test came home, my parents would be like, no TV for 2 weeks, or no TV for whatever length of time. So I, being a TV junkie, and Anne Marie being sympathetic to the cause, she would help me build forts in the living room. So we would take, all the cushions off and drape blankets and stuff like that, and we'd hide in the fort. Well, of course, my parents, she would then sit on the couch and turn the TV on, and I'd be hiding in the fort, and my parents would be like, Michael, you're not watching TV, are you? I'm like, of course not. I can't see. I can't see out. Well, you kind of could, because you'd have the little holes in, like, the crocheted blanket that was making the fort. So Anne Marie and I were always making forts, and she was my partner in crime when it came to making forts, especially when I was not allowed to watch TV. So Anne Marie, thank you for that. Playing wrestling in the house, Dad would get mad. So, the early 80s was all about wrestling. Saturday morning wrestling was on. Bob Backlund and the British Bulldogs and Superfly Snuka and all of these, Hulk Hogan, in the days of Hulk Hogan and Bob Backlund and all of these professional wrestlers. Anne Marie and I loved to watch wrestling on Saturday. So, of course, we would always play wrestling in the living room. So me and Anne Marie would be on the carpet, wrestling on the carpet, and, pushing each other and trying to get into headlocks and leg locks. And my dad would always yell at us, would you two stop grab assing and stop horsing around in there? I mean, we weren't hurting each other. We thought it was fun. But for some reason, he'd always say, somebody's going to get hurt or somebody's going to get mad. And then before you know it, the two of you are going to be fighting. So knock it off. So we enjoyed always wrestling in the living room, trying to imitate our favorite wrestling people. Dueling paper routes, the wagon versus the cart. So I think I had mentioned Anne Marie had a paper route at the same time I had a paper route. So I had, Thompson Street and Franklin Street and Linwood Avenue and Foster. So I had the immediate streets around our house, but Anne Marie's were a section of the town of Newton over. So she had to go a bit farther to deliver her papers. And what I used when I delivered my papers is Dad helped me make a kind of a homemade cart. So we went down to the post office, and back in the day, postmen used to have this cart. It was a three-wheeled cart with a handle, and they would have bags that hung over the sides for all of the mail. Well, they were throwing away these carts. They had them out back of the post office, and somebody said, we asked them, "Hey, you guys using any of these carts?" And they're like, "No, they're garbage. You can take whatever you want." So we took a couple of them, and Dad kind of like made a cart out of one of them. Here was the cart, and we had these, baskets from like a freezer basket, and the other baskets all kind of like zip tied and wired up. So I had this big cart that you could put tons of newspapers in, and Anne Marie had to use the wagon that was my dad's wagon when he was a kid. It was a radial flyer, red wagon with the sides. So on Sunday mornings, Anne Marie and I would get the papers that were delivered to our house, and we'd have to, either wrap them up and wrap them in a rubber band, or sometimes if it was raining, you had to put them in bags. But that was something that Anne Marie and I did every Sunday, and even during the week for years. We had to do our paper routes, and sometimes I would help her on hers, or she would help me on mine. Not very often, occasionally. But I just remember that was something that Anne Marie and I did, always doing the paper routes together. Halloween. Oh my gosh. So Halloween as a kid, well, you have to understand, my parents would never buy a costume, right? Being very frugal and very thrifty, my parents would never buy a costume. I mean, and they would help us put together costumes, but growing up in the Kimball household, if you wanted to be something for Halloween, you had to show initiative and you had to put your costume together. So inevitably, me and Tammy and Ann Marie would be something that was easy. A gypsy. A gypsy was always easy. You could raid mom's closet and throw on some clothes and a scarf and beads and makeup, and you could be a gypsy. Or a bum. You could raid dad's closet, and you could put dirt on your face and wear his clothes that were all baggy, and you could be a bum. I remember one Halloween I went as a girl, so I wore one of my mom's wigs and put makeup on me, and I was a girl. So we would always figure out our costumes, and me and Anne Marie and Tammy, we'd go out trick or treating, and then when we came back, we would try and figure out how to change up our costumes so we could go back out again, and especially go to all the houses that were giving out the good candy. So we would either switch costumes, or if I was wearing a mask, we would switch masks. We would always switch up our costumes somehow, so we could hit the houses again. And our parents were pretty cool about the candy. Generally, they were pretty cool. Whatever we got, they let us keep. Well, I remember one year I ate so much candy in like a 2 or 3 day period that I actually got hives on my body from eating so much candy. And, back then, I guess candy, the dangers of sugar was not well known like it is today. So parents today won't let their kids have that much sugar. Back then, they didn't really care. And I remember me and Tammy and Ann Marie, we would hoard our candy, and then of course we would trade. Right? I'll give you 2 Skittles for this, or I'll give you this for that, and we would barter and swap amongst ourselves who had the good candy and what candy we wanted to get. It's pretty fun. Fighting on who got to sit up front with a parent or stuck in the middle. Oh, God. So, with 3 siblings, somebody inevitably would get stuck. If both parents, mom and dad, were in the front seat and we had the station wagon, it was always a fight whoever had to sit in the middle. A lot of times that was me because or excuse me, yes, a lot of times that was me being the middle child. Or because I was a boy, I got to sit behind dad, and then Tammy and Anne Marie would have to fight out who got to sit in the middle. And a lot of times Anne Marie got stuck because she was the youngest. If it was just mom or dad, of course, the three of us would always fight about who sat in the front. And I think one time out of spite, my father told all three of us, sit in the back seat. Nobody's sitting in the front because I don't feel like listening to you fight anymore. So that happened. Summers. Oh my gosh. Summers were awesome. Fishing with Anne Marie. So here's the fishing story. One summer, Anne Marie and I got up on a Saturday morning and we decided that we were going to go fishing. So we got our poles together, and the night before we had gone out catching night crawlers. So if you don't know what a night crawler is, it's a worm, but they come out at night. And so these worms are like this long. I mean, they're huge. And what you do is you go out in your yard at night and you get a flashlight and you walk really, really slowly and quietly. You step very slowly because they can feel the vibrations, and you're shining a light in the yard looking for the night crawlers. They come out and they kind of just half of their body is in the hole and half of it's sticking out, and I guess either they're probing for food or whatever they do. But you be really still and really quiet, and you lean down and you pinch them like that, and you get them, and then you can just don't pull too hard, or you'll break them in half, but you can pull the worm out of the hole. And so we would collect night crawlers. We collected them in the night before, and we put them with some dirt in a can. It was a can for like racquetballs, so it was like a can about this big and about that round, you know. So we put them in there, and then Saturday morning, me and Ann Marie got on our bikes with our fishing poles, and we rode 4.3 miles on our bikes to Pawnskill Lake. So, you know, if you Google Newton and where Pawnskill Lake is, it was 4.3 miles. So we get there, and I actually had two fishing poles, and Anne Marie had one. So my two fishing poles, I had one that was a brand new reel, or that I had bought, and I was going to use that to like spin cast. So I put a spinner on there, and I zing throw it out there, and I was fishing with like a spinner, hoping to catch something like that. And my old pole, I loaded up corn, and I think corn or worms or something on the end of the hook with a weight, and I threw it out there to like catch a catfish or a carp or something like that, fish off the bottom. So there was a cinder block near where we were, so I propped my pole up on a cinder block and let it sit out there, and I stood a couple feet away, and I would cast, and then Anne Marie was a couple feet away from me, and she was just monitoring her pole because she was fishing off the bottom as well. So we were there for a while, and lo and behold, Anne Marie goes, "Michael, your pole." And I look over, and the end of my pole is doing this because I must have had a fish on, and it was pulling like this. And then all of a sudden, as it pulls down, it shoots forward, and the reel hit the end of the cinder block that it was leaning up against. So I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my pole, my pole!" So the pole that I had, I set it down, and as soon as I went to like go over there to grab my pole, it shot forward and launched itself into the water. Basically, the fish was pulling it away. So in a just split second reaction, I didn't want to lose my pole, so I jumped in after it. And this is probably it was in the summer, maybe it was August or September, so the water was cold. I had all my clothes on. I jump in after it trying to get it. Didn't get it, climb out, and here I am soaking wet. So I'm soaking wet, and I said, "Anne Marie, we got to call Dad. We got to call Dad, and he's got to come get us because I'm not riding my bike home soaking wet. I'm freezing." So she walked up the road to a house and found somebody who let her use their phone, and she called Mom and Dad and said, "We're at Pawnskill Lake. Could you come get us?" So Dad said, "No problem. I'll come get you in the truck." So while he was driving from Newton, there was a black man. There was a couple people there, but there was a black man who was also fishing. So he started just to cast out and reel his line in, kind of like let it sink to the bottom or reel it in to see if he could catch my line. Would you believe, just as my dad shows up, he caught our line. So he's like, "Hey, I think I caught your line." So he pulls in his line, and there's mine on his hook. So I grabbed the line, pulled the line in, pulled one in, and got the pole. And then I'm reeling it in, and lo and behold, I had a catfish that was probably that big. It was huge. We didn't want it. We're like, "Do you want this catfish?" He's like, "Yeah, I want that catfish. That's good eating." So we gave him the catfish. We packed up all of our gear, and Dad drove us home. So that's the infamous Michael and Anne Marie fishing story from my childhood. Okay, next page, and now we're continuing. These aren't necessarily Anne Marie memories, but these are just because I have 2 pages of siblings here. So these are just various memories of both my sisters. Well, you know what though? Hold on. It's 20 minutes. I'm going to make you wait. So I'm going to end this video here, and then next time I have 2 full pages of stories about my childhood with both Tammy, and Anne Marie. So I'm going to change my bookmark. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to upload this video, and I wish you a wonderful day. As the kids say, like and subscribe so you know when the next video comes out. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.